I've got another amazing guest today. Big fan of his, big fan of his career. Played for Hibs, Rangers, Norwich, and he's also been a manager for Airdrie, Dumbarton, and most recently Raith Rovers. It's Mr. Ian Murray. Ian, how are you, pal?
I'm very well, good evening. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem, mate. Like I say, I'm very excited to have you on, man. I have been watching your career for a long, long time. We'll get to the Raith Rover stuff, which I've got a lot to say about in a minute. But so we like to start for the beginning, mate. When you grew up in Edinburgh, what's your earliest memories of playing football?
Really early, obviously, like most kids. Grew up in a household that liked football. Played football and watched football since the day I can remember. I was really, really young. I had an older brother, which obviously normally entices you into something, and a dad who loved football. So I used to go to watch Hibs when we were, maybe 4, 5, 6 years old. My earliest memories was play football at primary school. At break time, lunchtime, like most kids, and then it progresses. As you get older, you start playing for the school team, and then you go to high school, and you continue to love football, keep going to games, play for the school team back then, as it was, and then you play for a boys' club team at the same time. So I think it's different now. I think you've got to pick one or the other, but certainly when I was growing up, it was both. You played for the school sometimes in the morning, and then you played for your boys' club in the afternoon, and you also fitted in going to a game on the Saturday. So lots of football on the weekends.
Yeah. And you started off at Hutchison Vale, which is a very well-known youth team in Edinburgh that a lot of players, I'm sure you're aware of, that have played for there, Derek Riordan, Gary Caldwell, to name a few. So how was that time at there, mate? It must have been a good apprenticeship for you at that point.
Yeah, it was. I mean, my brother played for a team in Edinburgh called Glen Park at the time. He's a couple of years older than me, so I used to go and train with them when I was like 7 or 8 years old, with older kids, 9, 10 years old, those guys were. So before I knew it, I was playing street football as well with my friends. So for me, it was pretty normal going and playing against guys that are 9, 10 when I was 7 and 8 at Glen Park. I was just training with my brother's team. I wasn't playing games with them. I'd always go along on the weekends with the hope that the opposition might be a couple of men short and get a wee game, because football to me was everything at that time. And then I went to Hutchison Vale. I went to their sort of probably one of the first ever in Scotland, I would imagine, at that age, in a kids' school, 8 or 9 years old, where it was purely just 5-side games at Stockton Enclosure in Edinburgh on a Friday night. And then after that, they kind of picked their players to go into under 10s at the time. Before the days of multiple teams at age groups, there was one team at every age group. That was it. And if you didn't play in that age group, then you had to go and find another team. So I went to Hutch at that age, and I was there until I was 15.
And then you had a wee period at Dundee United. Was there a couple of clubs looking about you at that point?
Yeah, I think again, it's for the sort of newer generation, it's different than it was now. There was probably 1 or 2 scouts in Edinburgh, mainly Hibs and Hearts, and a few of the English teams that would go and watch the games. Not loads. There wasn't millions of scouts going to games. There was a few, and there was always. I was training at Hibs at the time, down at Meadowbank Sports Centre. But Dundee United were the first real team to show a big interest in me. And I went up. I was training in Edinburgh with Dundee United, first of all. And then they invited me up to a sort of big it must have been a big sort of trial game for everybody that they've got in their sort of soccer centres throughout Scotland. And then the day after I played in that game, they phoned me up and wanted to sign me, which they were the first team that offered me at the time an opportunity to go and play in a different league. Just as I was going to like 14, 15, there was a new league getting set up in the west of Scotland called the Youth Initiative League. But it was based in the west of Scotland. So it was a lot of travelling for my dad in particular. It was a Sunday as well, which kind of suited me down to the ground because we were big Hibs fans and most games back then were on a Saturday, so it was quite enticing. We can go to Easter Road on a Saturday and still keep football going on a Sunday. So I eventually signed for Dundee United, a really, really good side. And at that time as well, people probably forget, Dundee United were probably the best youth team in Scotland. They had not best youth team, but best youth success in Scotland. They were bringing through a lot of their own players under Jim McLeish, who was the chairman at the time. So I went there and had 2 seasons there, and it was fantastic.
Did you feel that you could have broke your way into the first team? And I know that, there was a couple of managers at your time there. Obviously, Jim McLean was the director as well. So were you feeling confident at that point that you could go on and progress in Dundee United first team?
Yeah, I think everybody at that age believes or wants to believe they're going to be a football player, and to be associated with a team was everybody's sort of goal at that age. That was a goal. First of all, get picked up by a senior team, go into their youth sort of setup, and then try and progress through. But it was daunting as well at the same time. Going up there, and I went up there. And school holidays was the main one. We used to go up and spend most of the holidays up there training. And you were thrown in. You were thrown into Lions Den. It was straight into the away changing room with the youth guys who are 17, 18, and you're 15. It's only a couple of years, but these guys have been in there full time for a number of years. Older, you're learning straight away, and then also, especially summer, it was pre-season, so everybody was together in the training ground. So the first team guys that you watch, the first team guys that you read about in the papers, the first team guys you see on TV, suddenly you're standing beside them doing the same runs as well. There was no special conditioning at that age. You were thrown in and you were doing the first team training, which was really, really scary at the time, but also on the other side was fantastic.
What about the way they treated you in that? Because I know that I spoke to a number of ex-players in that, and they had a hard time growing up at the culture at the time. With older players treating the younger guys and that. What was your experience early days at Dundee United?
Yeah, it's certainly different than it is now, but that's society as well. That's life. Everything's moved on. We're talking, 25 years ago now, more than that, nearly 30 years ago. But when I look back for me myself, it taught me so much. It really did. It was hard. There's no doubt about it. You were thrown in with seasoned professionals, big players. Maurice Malpass, David Nares, David Hannahs, Duncan Ferguson had just left at that point to go to Rangers, but he was still, thereabouts when I was growing up. So you're learning all the time. It was a hard school. There's no question about that. But it makes or breaks you. At that time, that's what it was.
So then after your time at Dundee, you had a wee... Hibs were after you, basically. So the Hibs came in for you, and how did that move come about then?
It came out the blue. Again, at that point, there was only 2 or 3 scouts to Edinburgh. It was... I was getting to 16, nearly 17 at the time. And they literally phoned my house one day. Must have heard I was leaving school. I was going to leave school after 5th year. So they phoned my house. The scout phoned my house. Again, back in the day, no mobile phones. They were kind of just coming out. So they phoned the house one afternoon. Spoke to my dad, and they wanted to sign me, which was, in fact, sorry, I'll take it back a little bit. Apologies. Dundee United had offered me an S form at the time. Sorry, I was on an S form at Dundee United, which was amazing, and I was delighted because that was a big thing at that age. And then they offered me a full-time contract at Dundee United to go into the youth team 2 years. And then just in that sort of, must have been 2 or 3 weeks before I was due to go to Dundee United. I hadn't signed it yet, but I was due to go to Dundee United. Hibs phoned the house and offered me a contract. Now, at that time, with the rules, if you'd signed a schoolboy form, which I had at Dundee United, they were entitled to hold your registration for a year. The minute Hibs called, and I was quite immature at that age, I wasn't a huge fan of leaving home. The minute Hibs called, and I went down to meet Alex McLeish. Billy McNeill was director of football at the time. I went down there, and literally overnight, I was in at Hibs because I went down and they said, right, start tomorrow and we'll sort it all out. So, yeah, it was like 1 minute, I'm at high school, and next minute I'm in the Hibs.
Crazy, man.
Yeah.
When
I look back, it is crazy. Literally less than 24 hours later, I was going into Easter Road. But maybe that was the best thing.
So obviously, it was your boyhood club in that. Was there any was there any maybe contemplation of maybe staying at Dundee United? Maybe if you thought you could maybe get in that team more than you could the Hibs team, or was it just no, I'm gone?
It was pretty much I'm going. We had season tickets at Easter Road. We'd only had a season ticket for a couple of years. My first thought was, to be honest, was we don't have to buy season tickets anymore. So, I'd went from Hibs had been relegated as well from the Premier League to the First Division by Dundee United, ironically, on the last day of the season or second last day of the season, and it was the first time I'd experienced Hibs being relegated. Painful, very, very painful watching grown men cry in the terraces on a Saturday afternoon. I remember one guy in particular who I saw every week, because I was Hibs daft at that time. When I was that age, I was Hibs daft. And I was going to go one way or the other way. One way was follow Hibs through thick and thin, home and away. And the other way was football. Football kind of won in the end. But I used to go and watch Hibs home and away on my own, buy my own tickets, get there by myself. I remember going up to Batodry on a Wednesday night in the Scottish Cup, straight from school, 15 years old, 16 years old. Me and my friend jumped Hibs, put on 3 buses that day, that night even. We go home at 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, going to school the next day. That's how much we enjoyed watching Hibs. So when Hibs came, it was a no-brainer for me. As great as Dundee United were, and I would never dismiss that. They were really, really good to me and my family, I have to say, and they were a fantastic setup, great club, but it was Hibs and I had to go.
You mentioned the S-Storm thing a minute ago, and that stopped you playing for Hibs for a wee while, didn't it?
Yeah, again, I was a wee bit lucky. In Hibs' downfall when going into the First Division, they were kind of out with the reserve league. So we used to play bounce games against, like your Raith Rovers, Celtic, Aberdeen, whoever it may be. So the reserve league didn't exist. So if we were still in the reserve league, it would have been a problem for me because, training's great, training's fine, but playing games is the main. That's where you get the real experience. That's where you try and impress the manager. You'll see you in training and think you're doing okay, then they'll throw you into the reserve game. So we had a bounce games probably most weeks. And I played in most of them, which was again just invaluable learning experience for me at the time, which I didn't know against good players. I remember playing in the reserves for Hibs against Kilmarnock, 2 strikers, Ian Durant, Alex McLeish. 17 years old to play against these 2 guys. It's just incredible. You're playing against Celtic, and I remember it wasn't long after the World Cup, Tom Boyd's playing right back, and I'm playing left midfield, and I'm just thinking, wow, this guy's going to obviously bully me a little bit, and he's going to be better than me, but what an experience for me that was. And to be fair to the manager, Alex McLeish at the time, I was doing okay. I was doing all right. I was pretty fit at the time, and I was, I wouldn't say wasn't easy on the eye at that age, quite gangly and stuff, but I was energetic, I was athletic, and he used to always say to me, Ian, if I could put you in the squad today, I would, type thing. And I thought it was always a little bit, that's good, the manager, but is it really true? And then the first opportunity he got when the year was up, he put me in the squad. So forever grateful.
But see the fact you weren't in the team though, like that was Dundee United's decision though, wasn't it? So was that a spite they done that because they could have just let you let you play?
Yeah, of course.
Because I know you had a problem with Jim McLean. Well, Jim McLean had a problem with you leaving, but
yeah, at that time, it was Dundee United's decision. But look, I took it as a sign of respect, and I'm doing something right. That they're obviously not happy. And I understood why. And do you know what? I don't blame them. It was just the way it was back then. Nowadays, it would be, people would be going crazy about it. But look, it was worth it in the end for me because I wanted to go to Hibs. I wanted to stay in Edinburgh as well. Like I said, I was quite immature at that age. I really didn't want to leave Edinburgh. So, to go to Hibs at that age and literally mix with the guys from one day I'm watching on the terrace and John Hughes and Sean Dennis piece, Barry Lavetti, Stevie Crawford's. I'm literally going in the next day and I'm just like, wow, this is just turned 24 hours.
Well, once you did get in the team, mate, you're a bit of a mainstay in that team. You got promotion the first season. How was that first year for you? Were you feeling confident and happy, basically?
Yeah, well, that first season I couldn't play because that was a year that I was had to kind of just train and play bounce games. But Hibs had a wonderful team. We signed Russell Latapi, Frank Soze. To get these two players at any level was incredible. To get them in the Championship was outstanding. Hibs obviously went for it that season, pretty evidently so, with the players that they signed. People forget Hibs got off to a terrible start that year. They got beat Stranraer in the first game at Easter Road, 1-0. And after that, it went on a kind of unstoppable. They just won it. They won it by quite a lot of points. But they were also geared not just to win the champion or Division 1 at the time, but they were geared to go into the Premier League. They were ready. Added a few players, Stuart Lovells of the world, Gary Smith, Paul Phoenix, really, really good seasoned pros that had been around, and they were a Premier League team kind of before they got there. But yeah, Hibs were well backed. I think you look at the evidence and the players that they signed.
Defo. And did you, when you were training with these guys, did you feel comfortable that, I can make the step up here, I can play in this team?
Again, I don't think you ever feel comfortable. You're always trying to impress your teammates, make sure that they think you're the best player. And again, it's back in the days of there's only two teams. There was a first team and there was a second team. There was no in between. So occasionally you would get called over to go and train if there were a man short or two men short. Obviously, the manager knew what he was doing. He was blooding young players very, very slowly into the first team environment, i.e. training. But I remember going on a trip to Scotland under 16s, sorry, must have been their 17s, 16s. I had a really good tournament. I knew it had a good tournament. And I had the opportunity to leave Hibs at that point because they knew about the contract situation in terms of it was signed, but it wasn't inked type thing. So I went down south for a weekend with my dad again, and they offered me a contract. But again, I was immature. I mean, I couldn't go to Dundee. There was no chance of me going to England. And I also wanted to stay at Hibs. So in a perverse way, that gave me a little bit of confidence as well. Other teams wanted you, and they've noticed what you're doing. You're training hard. You're playing in bounce games. But the real test was always first team training for me at that age because it was difficult. It was really, really hard. The gaffer played, Alex played in the games at the end with training. He was still quite a young man himself. And he was really hard on people. He was hard on you. It didn't matter what age you were, he was hard on you.
And I want to talk a wee bit about your position as a player back then. See, when you were at Hutchison Vale and then Dundee United, were you a fullback at that point or were you playing midfield? Because I'll remember you being a fullback.
Yeah, Hutchie, I started out with left winger. As most kids do, you progress back the way. So I was into centre mid for a little bit, centre half a little bit, eventually a fullback. At Dundee United, when I went there, I was mainly a left fullback. Played a couple of times into the sort of centre of defence, but yeah. And I went to Hibs. When I went to Hibs, I was probably more a centre midfielder at that age because I'd been playing for Scotland at that position. So Donald Park, who was the Hibs youth coach at the time, or the Hibs youth team manager, he also took Scotland under 16s. So I knew Donald a little bit, and he probably knew me more as a centre mid.
You mentioned Alex McLeish a wee minute ago. Obviously, he played under a number of managers at Hibs the first time. Bobby Williamson, Alex McLeish, Frank Soze, Tony Mowbray. I'm assuming you take a wee bit for these guys in your career now as a manager.
Yeah, of course you have to. You'd be a fool not to. Maybe subconsciously you're not taking you're taking little bits. You're not taking loads at that age. Who would? But yeah, I look back on the managers that I had, and I think very, very fortunate. Alec was. I mean, I'm obviously always indebted to Alex McLeish. He signed for Hibs. He signed for. He took a like to me, but he was hard on me as well. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't all roses. It wasn't always easy. Frank, as a teammate, absolutely outstanding. Just a brilliant guy. Just for a guy that what he achieved in football and his ability, the way that he treated everybody, not just sort of the older players in the team, but the young players, was amazing. Bobby Williamson as well. Probably had my best form under Bobby at Hibs at 21. But also other guys, Colin Calderwood, Mixed Pat Lane, and John Hughes, Pat Phelan. You learn from them all. You have to try and take something out of it. You don't always have to like it. You don't always have to agree with what they're telling you or saying to you, but you've got to try and take something.
And see, after you got promotion and stuff like that, the next season you end up going to Alloa for a wee brief period, is that right?
Yeah,
Why is it that happened? Because you were a big part of the team that got promoted.
Yeah, I was in and out of the team. Hadn't played that much. What it was back then was we had the winter break. So there was a training camp in Spain that the guys were going on, and then a few of us went out on loan for the month. So I went to Alloa in December. Terry Christie was the manager. They're in the first division or championship now, struggling at the bottom end. Went there for the month. Only played 2 games because of the weather, and it was a grass pitch at Alloa at the time. So a lot of games were cancelled. Played against Livingston, played against Inverness, Caledonian Thistle, who were 2 really good sides in that division. So it was a really good learning for me. Playing. People remember the old Alloa sort of stadium. People are really close to the pitch. You're playing against good players as well. It was tough. And then I played there, which I loved. I loved every minute of it, actually. Toughened me up a little bit, taught me a few lessons. And then I went back to Hibs straight after the window, and the sort of winter window closing, and we went up to Aberdeen. I was in the first team. I was in the first team squad that night. Went to Aberdeen on Friday night. Nicest day as you can imagine. And I was playing. I was actually in the team on the Saturday. And then the phone goes off at 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning. The kit man saying, "Look out the window." It was covered in snow, which you couldn't believe. So the game was cancelled. So I was a wee bit gutted. I thought, God, I went on loan. Where you kind of, the feeling of going on loan is quite difficult. You think, right, is the manager put me out here? For what reason? But he'd obviously been I'd done okay in the games, so that was cancelled. But the next game I was playing, so I literally went from not being on the training camp in Spain for the winter break, and then straight back into the first team, which was again fantastic.
So would you recommend that then, if there's any younger players watching just now?
100%.
Maybe go out and loan to a lower league, and then instead of being at a B team or
100%, even more so these days, because there's still that lower league grit and determination about players, which I watch the lower league a little bit, or lower leagues. It's where you learn, isn't it? You only learn, unfortunately, from probably playing against players that are better than you, more experience than you, learning a few tricks off them. I would absolutely be a massive advocate of going on loan and getting game time. If you're a footballer for a reason, you want to play football. There's no point in sitting around saying, I'm training with the first team. Yeah, it's good. It's a good experience, but you need to play games.
Definitely. And then you go back to Hibs and you have a very successful couple of years there. And then obviously, bigger teams start coming in for you, and then you end up going to Rangers in 2005. How did that move come about, and were you contemplating, staying at Hibs?
Yeah, obviously, Alec left to go to Rangers, which was, something that didn't happen at Hibs too often at that point. Hibs were quite steady under manager. Alec Miller had been there before that for many, many years. I grew up with Alec Miller as Hibs manager. He was a Hibs manager. So when he left, it was very strange when I was a kid. Jim Duffy came in, didn't last very long for whatever reason. And then Alec came in. It was a strange experience. We'd done really well the year before. We finished third in the league, qualified for Europe, ran AAK Athens very, very close over 2 legs. But I think again, I'm reading between the lines. I don't know. Alec probably knew time was up, for 2 reasons. Hibs were probably running out of money at the time. The Satanta deal was about to collapse, which nobody knew, but maybe Alec knew. Plus, Rangers come calling for you. He was a Rangers supporter. He's from the West. Why wouldn't you leave? So he'd left, and I'd stayed. Frank Sozzi became the manager. I'd done okay. We kind of let Frank down a wee bit as a team, as a group, because we were better than that. And Frank was a young manager. We should have done better for him. And then Bobby Williamson came in. Again, he had to blood a lot of youngsters, so I was probably one of the older players in the squad at 21. There was a couple older, but not many. And eventually, I was getting towards 24. The Bosman ruling had came in, and Alec wanted to sign me for Rangers. And I just felt at that time, for me, it wasn't just about Rangers and you're going to earn a bit more money. It was more, you're working for Alex McLeish again. He trusts you, he knows you. Andy Watson was assistant manager. So when you throw that in the first place, and then you throw in it's Glasgow Rangers, you're walking out in front of 50,000 every single week. The expectation, the sort of demands that are put on you, they're difficult, but they're perversely really, really enjoyable at the same time. You want to go and test yourself against the best, try and be the best. So when Alex gave me that call, for me, being a Hibs supporter, being from Edinburgh, it was always going to be difficult. There's no question about that. But to play at that level, I had to go and take it.
So you end up going to Rangers. Did you find a difference in the, ability-wise, basically straight away when you're into training and that?
Yeah, I did. Again, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I went to Rangers on my first day. We flew out to Toronto for pre-season. Again, just a different parallel from what I used to. Not saying it's better or try to sound big-headed, but you're flying out to Toronto. You're in a private plane. On your first day, you're playing with Scotland and other international players. So it's daunting at the same time. So I knew a couple of guys in the Rangers squad, but I didn't know everybody. And a lot of them were a lot better than I thought, because you know what you're like when you're at Hibs and you're cocky and you're a young guy and you're playing against Rangers, you think you'll take care of them when you play them. But when you see them close up and you're training with them every day and you see how good they are, it's a real, real eye-opener. And the demands that they're put on you, the demands were higher. There's no question. I'm not trying to discredit Hibs or any other team, because you always have personal demands, but this was a different ballgame for me.
No, we spoke to Gavin Ray a month or two ago now, and he was saying the exact same. I know he played with him. So, see, you're saying about Ibrox and that. Obviously, you've been to Ibrox with Hibs several times. How would you describe the difference of being like the home player there? Was that a lot of big pressure there?
Yeah, again, totally different. I think you've got to thrive on these sort of situations. I mean, I thrived in it being a Rangers player, but I thrived in it also being a Hibs player. I used to love going to Ibrox, Parkhead, Tynecastle, Pittodrie in particular. Those were places where you showcase your talent. Again, without being disrespectful, when you're at teams like Hibs, Hearts, Motherwell's, Dundee's, Dundee United, you want to impress the opposition at these places. Not just the opposition, but certainly at that stage, the only games that scouts are basing you on was the Edinburgh Derby, Celtic and Rangers. They weren't interested if you were playing well against Kilmarnock, Dundee. They just weren't. They would come and say, oh yeah, you've done well against Dundee, but I'm going to watch them against Rangers away. If you do well there, you've got a chance. So I used to love going there. Absolutely loved it. Always thought we could win. More often than not, didn't. But we had some good results. Both Celtic Park and Ibrox and Tynecastle. But yeah, thrived off it. And when you go as a Rangers player, it's different. It's different. You see, to use a horrible expression, it is the religion. It's football. They expect to win the games. It doesn't matter who they're playing. They expect you to conform to what they want, and you have to. You've got a duty to try and do that.
How do you look back on your time at Rangers? I mean, one thing I've learned from talking to guys like yourself over the last few months is that it was something I didn't really appreciate until speaking to you, is that, I always thought, right, when a player gets injured, they're sitting on it, they're getting paid for just sitting about, they're injured and that. But I know for a fact that it's a lot more than that. It's you want to be playing. Footballers want to be playing football. So I know that a lot of your time there was spent injured. So how do you look back on that? And it's just a shame that you were injured quite a bit.
Yeah, I think hindsight's a wonderful thing, and you get a bit older. I look back at it with fond memories. There's no question about that. I took a sort of virus in the summer. Paul Le Guen came in, and I took a virus in the summer, kept me out for 6 months. It took me a bit of time, even though I was back training and playing. It took me a bit of time to get over that. Probably, a good year. But overall, my time at Rangers was amazing. It was an experience that I'll never get again, obviously. But it was an experience that I never imagined as well. It was a different world for me. It really was. you were just treated differently. You were on a different level, on the pitch and off the pitch. So I loved it. Yeah, frustration with the injury, but there was nothing I could do about that. I'm still very proud of my time at Rangers. Proud of my time at Hibs as well. Obviously, loved it. But to play for Rangers 60 odd times in that year and a half that was fit, it could have been more. It could have been better. Of course, it could have, but it could have been a lot worse.
You mentioned Paul Le Guin there. Could you tell us a wee bit about him? It must have been a big difference when he came in. Alex left. What was the biggest differences that you noticed when Paul Le Guin came in?
There was a lot of differences in Paul. Again, I have to say I really like Paul. Good to me. One of the first few days he came in, I had the opportunity to go on loan to a decent team in Germany, and he pulled me into his office and he said, "Look, I've had this offer for you to go on loan, but I don't want you to go on loan. I want you to stay." Which, when you're at Rangers and the manager wants you to stay, especially a new manager, a foreign manager, everybody's worried about their career at that point, the situation that they're in. To hear that was music to my ears. Now, I look back on things and I think, well, that would have been a fantastic experience, opportunity. But when you hear the manager of Rangers, Paul Le Guin, who'd done so well with Leon, saying he wants you to stay, then, God, you're cock a hoop. You're straight back in the changing room, bouncing, bubbly. Paul had differences in his approach to football. Of course, he did. He came, obviously, from France. I quite liked him. Some guys didn't, which is quite normal. He was probably just a little bit too ahead of his time, and he came to Rangers at the wrong time. But I couldn't say too much bad about Paul Le Guin.
I know people have made a big deal about his training methods and that, running through forest, dodging trees and all that. Were you part of all that?
Yeah, we used to do a run every Monday morning, win, lose or draw. It was a 6K, 7K run. That was it. There was no football really. A couple of guys who hadn't played would go and do a little bit. But I was an athlete. I wasn't a technically brilliant player. I was a runner. I was a worker. For me, it was probably not a bad thing. Quite enjoyed it. But a lot of guys didn't. I understand that. And they didn't take to it, which, Paul was pretty adamant in his approach, as you probably should be as a manager. So, yeah, there was a few clashes with guys, but again, nothing that was crazy. Probably a lot of it was blown out of proportion, but also ultimately cost Paul his job.
Yeah, he moved on, and then obviously Walter Smith came in after that. So what was your experience of him, mate? You ended up going to Norwich, so you didn't really get much time under Walter, but what happened there?
Yeah, Walter was great again. Came from the national team. I've got, again, you're saying it too often these days, God rest him, Walter was fantastic. One of those, a bit like Alex McLeish, when he walked in the room, God, did you stand to attention. Brought in Alex McLeish, Dean Durant as his backroom staff, Kenny McDowell as well. They took most of the training. Walter would stand and watch, but you knew he was watching. So he came in. I played most of the end of that. Paul Le Guin left. I played most games at the end of that season. When it came to pre-season, we were training at Ibrox. I remember maybe it was an open day or something. And he pulled me in after training and said, "Look, Norwich want to sign you. You don't have to go. I'm not chasing you out, but you're probably not going to play as much as you want." When you're a footballer and you hear those words, you're not going to play. You want to play. So I went down to Norwich. Peter Grant was the manager. Jim Duffy was assistant. And it was a tough time for Norwich as well. The squad wasn't great. They'd just been relegated from the Premier League. And I probably jumped just a little bit too soon from Rangers. I probably should have stayed at least until the January.
As you say, though, when the manager says, you're going to be a bit part player, it's, but that's the thing about guys like Walter Smith. I'm a Celtic fan, and you hear things about Tommy Burns, you hear things about Walter Smith, these guys. I mean, they're just had an aura about them. And when you're telling that story, mate, I'm just thinking about how whenever you hear players over the years, they talk about how they wish their managers are just honest with them, and then Walter Smith just turned around and said that to you, and although it must have really hurt at the time because you want to be playing for Rangers, you must have appreciated the honesty there as well.
Oh, incredible honesty. What again, people don't really know is like honesty for players. As hard as it can be, and as hard as it is. And Tommy Burns was the same. I had Tommy at Scotland. I was very fortunate, growing up in that era to have these sort of guys around me. Told you the truth. Like you say, it was difficult, but mutual respect for each other. Just because he doesn't, he might find one player over another player, doesn't mean he thinks you're a bad guy. Doesn't mean he thinks you're a bad player, by the way. He just thinks this player for him is better. And what a lot of people don't know is Walter actually got me the Airdrie job when I came back from Norway. He was called up about me. So forever grateful for that. Alex McLeish got me the Dumbarton job. Again, I know that. These guys probably don't know I know that, but I know that. So those connections you make within football, even though it doesn't always turn out to be great in terms of the football side, it's more about the human connection and your behaviour and your training methods, what you give to people. We look after each other in a perverse way again, but to grow up in that era, some of the Scottish football, even Billy McNeill at 15 years old being director of football at Hibs, a lot of people forget Billy McNeill was director of football at Hibs. I'm sitting at 15, 16 with my dad, Billy McNeill on one side, Alex McLeish on the other. Two legends that even more so now.
Unbelievable. I mean, again, that's why probably you're a good manager. You've had these guys over the years, But you get back to Norwich anyway. You said you jumped too soon there. I asked you how you would sum up your time at Rangers. What about Norwich there? You didn't play too much there. It didn't quite work out. What happened there?
Yeah, it was a really difficult time. Again, Peter Grant, fantastic to me. Jim Duffy, fantastic to me. Good bunch of guys. Balance of the squad, in my opinion, was wrong. It was a club that needed, again, TLC. Training ground was probably built in the 90s. We had a team that had been relegated from the Premier League the year before. Very difficult. Very, very difficult when you get relegated to get the club going again. I went down there, and if I'm being really honest, I wasn't 100% fit. My knee was bothering me. Again, I had that. Again, what I was saying earlier about the sort of virus I had in the summer previous, it was still hanging around me. It wasn't. It was nowhere near as bad as it was, but it was hanging there. And I remember my knee being really, really sore all the time. Couldn't really shift it. We went on a really poor run. Peter got sacked, unfortunately, and Jim Duffy came in and took over, sort of interim, for a few games. And then Glenn Roeder came in as manager after Jim, and it was different for me. It was a real, again, the first time I'd been away from Edinburgh, believe it or not, and we just, the travelling was a lot. There's no excuse for that. You expect that you're in Norwich, you're going to travel. You have to travel. So, being 26, 27, you have to be mature enough to handle that. And I probably, again, wasn't mature enough at that stage. And I found it difficult. I did find the championship really, really difficult. It wasn't what I was used to. But the football club in general, fantastic. The people in Norwich is a lovely place. There's a hell of a lot worse places in Norwich to go to. And the people are great. But for me, for the 6 months out there, it was just something. It just didn't feel right for me.
Again, though, I mean, being a footballer, it must be completely different, though, for a normal guy like myself. If me going down to Norwich, that would be a daunting thing, especially in my 20s and that. But, coming for yourself, your point of view, you're not just going down, you're down there in the limelight, you're it's the pressure of everything as well. And, you're not just leaving your home, it's a completely different way of life, you know what I mean, for a guy like yourself.
Yeah, it's completely different down there. I mean, as I say, Norwich is a wonderful city. It's a bit more rural as well. You've most of the lads stayed outside Norwich in the sort of villages, farm villages dotted around the East Anglia area. There wasn't the same sort of outlook on football, just the way it was. We'd come off, we were bottom of the league at the time, and we'd come off and there were guys, fans slapping you in the back going to your car, saying, "Oh, well done, you've done your best." And I'm thinking, done our best? God, this was at Rangers, where I came from. We'd be getting escorted to our car because the fans are going to go crazy. So it's completely different. Again, I probably went there at the wrong time. I'll never speak bad of Norwich as a club or as a city.
How was Delia? Did you have any dealings with her?
Nah, never. I never had any dealings with Delia.
Nah?
Nah, never. We were very much trained at quite a remote training centre at the outskirts. As you can imagine, down there, it was tired, and we did some TLC, and then we were at obviously the stadium for home games. But yeah, I never really saw Delia.
So eventually, you end up going back to Hibs, mate. Was that something that you were set out to do? Were you did Hibs just happen to come in for you?
Yeah, it wasn't something I set out to do. Hibs were going through a strange time. John Collins was a manager, and then John Collins left, and I got a call from my agent saying Hibs want to sign you. Hibs didn't have a manager at the time, so I was thinking, right, but we don't have a manager. So it was a bit strange. And then I was assured by the chairman at the time that don't worry, it'll be okay. The new manager wants you. I didn't know who the new manager was. And then Mixer Patline came in. Came back up the road about a week later. And I played with Mixer. Mixer was in the team when I played. But so yeah, when Mixer was appointed, it was kind of, for me, it was fantastic. I thought, oh, I know this guy. Bit strange though, because it was the first guy that I played for who I played with as well. We grew up in an era where it was a bit wild and stuff, so it was strange, but I was delighted to get back up the road, I have to say. It's what I wanted. It was back to Scotland, comfort. I was totally out of my comfort zone down south. So I went up to Hibs in the January of 2008, I think it was, and my first game was Edinburgh Derby, which again was probably the best thing for me. I hadn't played for 5 or 6 weeks. I hadn't really trained either. But the Hibs fans only had a wee grudge against me for going to Rangers, so it was straight back into action.
And you mentioned Mixer there, but what did you have trouble treating him like a gaffer at that point, or did you just kind of get your head down and be a professional?
Yeah, I got my head down straight away. He was a manager, he's a boss. You've got to try and do what the boss says and do the best. And I like Mixer. I always like Mixer as a player. He taught me a lot. Again, goes back to when you're 17, 18, 19, you're training with these guys. Mixer was a big man. He was a beast of a guy. Played at a high level, English Premier League, the national team. He would throw you about a little bit, but you would learn off it. So it wasn't just the football side. He was a great guy off the park as well. So yeah, you go back up to Edinburgh. I had a lot to prove as well to the supporters, because supporters weren't overly enthusiastic by my signing, because I'd left them and went to Rangers. So you have a point to prove. You come back up the road, so you try and do it.
That's something I'll never understand, is how football fans can be annoyed at players. You think of any other walk of life, man. If somebody comes in for me in my work tomorrow, I'll say this and my boss will be watching this right tomorrow, but I'll tell you now, if somebody comes in for me tomorrow and offers me more money, more opportunities, I'm gone.
It's football. It's football, not just football, but football runs through your veins. It causes a lot of emotions, causes a lot of bad mistakes, costs a lot of money to follow a team. But yeah, you're right. At the end of the day, look, I had a season ticket at Hibs. I was playing for Hibs. I was captain at Hibs. I had a chance to go to Rangers, and it wasn't just monetary. Obviously, that helps. There's no point in anybody. You see it still now. There's no point in lying. Down south in particular, the money now is just ridiculous. But at the time, you're earning X amount, you're going to X amount, and you add in all the add-ons in terms of the prestige, the European opportunities, the international opportunities. It's huge. It's probably bigger now. Let's just use Trent Alexander-Arnold going to Liverpool, Real Madrid. It's probably the best example at the moment. It's not just money, because you could earn money anywhere he went, but it's prestige of Real Madrid. What comes with that in terms of endorsements and payment, and the opportunity to play for one of the biggest clubs in the world. It's just the law of the land, unfortunately. And I'm yet to meet a player from Edinburgh, Hibs or Hearts, by the way, that's turned down and moved to Old Firm.
I couldn't agree more with the Trent thing. I mean, Liverpool fans, obviously, they see themselves as a massive club, you know, and they're just thinking, well, Trent, you could have been here for life. But, you know, I agree with you. You know, it's not just money for that. You know, it's a whole different way of life over there. It's just, but I agree. So how did you fit? What did you notice the big differences between your first time at Hibs and then coming back?
The biggest one was the training ground. When I left Hibs never had a training ground. We were going to Easter Road every day, getting changed and then getting told we were training, local parks basically, or colleges or universities or high schools, whatever it was. So when I went back to Hibs at the training ground, which was amazing, I was used to a training ground because I went to Rangers, and then at Norwich we had a training ground. So, but to go back to Hibs and have a training ground, I thought it was amazing, fantastic. The progression of the club as well. So that was a real positive. I went back in and I thought the squad wasn't bad. I thought it was average at best. It was too big as well, to be honest. A lot of young guys in the squad. Again, maybe that's because they built a training ground. There's not endless supplies of money. Something has to sacrifice the other. They'd won the CIS Cup the year before, so they had some good players. Chris Hogg obviously was there. Rob Jones, Benji, Zamama. They were great players, but they were kind of littered around by other guys. And then we signed when Mixu came in, we signed a couple. Signed John Rankin, myself, and Colin Nish. So it kind of changed from John Collins' sort of the way he was doing it in terms of young foreign guys. We were signing a bit more experienced Scottish players.
Let's talk a wee bit about your international career, mate. You made 6 appearances for your country. Made your debut against Canada. What was the feeling when you get that call up?
Yeah, again, immense pride. It was at Easter Road, ironically, and I'd been away with the 21s. I think it must have been the midweek before. Can't remember where we were. The first team were there as well, and then I was on the plane back. We were flying back. We used to share a plane with the first team at the time. And the manager came up to me and just said, "You're coming with us next, or in a few days." And I was delighted. So to me, don't get me wrong, I'm not daft. It was at Easter Road, Canada. They're probably trying to get a few extra tickets sold at the same time, but you don't care. You don't care. You just don't care. You look at the instance now, or last week with Scotland, didn't have a goalkeeper. They phone someone up, comes back his holiday. Guy probably knows it's his only chance. If he's not in the squad by now, then he's never going to be. So you grab it. Because it's a moment nobody can take away from you. 1 cap, 100 caps. But I like the 100 caps. But it never happened. But at that moment in time, you're playing for your national team, you're playing for your country, you're playing for the people in your country.
I always wonder, like, especially with a team like Scotland. So you're playing for Hibs week in, week out. You go to Scotland, you're seeing guys you've maybe not seen in months, or you spoke to in months or whatever. How's it like? What's it like playing like that? The understanding and stuff like that. Do you notice a difference there?
Yeah, it is different. International football is completely different. You're normally away. If you're playing at home or away, you're away in a hotel. You're training maybe twice a day maximum, in terms of maybe 2 or 3 times a week to build up to the game. It's much more of a cup final build up, especially the games on a Saturday. You can try and make it as close as you want to a club culture, but it's very, very, very difficult, because it must be very hard. I always thought about international managers, how hard it must be. Every game's a cup final. Every game's a cup final. If you lose 1 or 2 in a row, it's a crisis. At club football, you've got 1 or 2, 3 games in a week sometimes. You can rectify it. You can try and work on it. You can change your team pretty quickly. And people forget that, yeah, of course you're playing for your country and it's amazing, but the country doesn't pay your bills at the end of the day. The country doesn't pay your salary. So see if the players don't fancy it for whatever reason, what can the manager do? It's very, very hard. Very, very difficult. And probably emotionally, I think, especially for the manager and backroom staff, it must be emotionally draining, because you build yourself up to these games all week, and suddenly You might lose one, like I said, or you might lose two, and boom, you're down like a stone. And you've got to wait, normally, 3-4 months for the next one. Really hard job, I think.
See, that's the thing. I mean, a lot of people are criticising Steve Clarke at the moment, but you know, you look at Steve Clarke's body of work before Scotland. He was at Kilmarnock where they finished third because he was playing with he had these players day in, day out. He had them drilled, defensively solid. You know, he was a coach at Chelsea. He had West Brom playing the same way. But you know, it must be really different for a guy like Steve Clarke, as you say. You know, he's not getting to work with these players day in, day out. He's getting a couple of days and then boom, you've got a couple of games.
Yeah, that's it. I think obviously Steve done an amazing job at Kilmarnock. You know, to finish third in the league and beating the old firm fairly regularly, especially at home. You know, he was a perfect fit for Scotland at the time. But again, I know he played for Scotland and stuff, but I think he's handled it incredibly well. And I see it. I read about it, the negativity at the moment on the national side. But when I look at the national squad, I think it's a fantastic squad. They're going to lose games, though. They're going to lose games because that's football. I think Steve's handled it incredibly well, and I think people forget where we were 20 years ago. You know, we were really poor. And Scotland's got no defined right to be good, just because we're Scotland. We've got to remember where we come from, where we are. But that doesn't mean we can't dream as well. We all want to qualify for every tournament. We all want to beat the best teams in the world. But to give Steve Clarke at the moment a hard time from what he's done and what he's achieved with the national side, I think it's strange.
I agree with you, but I think football was a lot harder 20 years ago, but that's a completely different debate anyway. But so we're going to your managerial career, mate. You end up going on to Dumbarton player manager. How did you find that step into management?
Yeah, strange. I was 31 at the time. I was in America. I came back, got a job fairly quickly. Went in part-time team in the championship. It was quite unusual at the time. Bottom of the league, and we went on a fantastic run. Guys were brilliant. Squad, fantastic, good lads. And I'll openly admit, I was 31. What did I know about management? Not a lot at that point. So I had to think on my feet. I had to try and do the things that I thought were correct, and it worked. So we've done really well there. First season we stayed up, incredibly amazing. Second season we were, I think we finished 5th at the time, just missed out the playoffs. Third season we were about mid-table, and then St Mirren came calling. They'd just been relegated, and I just felt it was time. Probably a freshen up for Dumbarton and for me. It wasn't just about me. It just felt it was the right
time. And so how did you find? Obviously, you were a football player. Did you, in your early days? Obviously you're a coach as well as a manager. How did you find your time actually like dealing with the players and that though, like the day in day out stuff?
Again, part time was slightly different. I'd never been part time before in my career, so it was different. And 31, you're a bit arrogant, you're a bit brash. You kind of only know what you know, what your experiences have given you. When I look back on it, my methods worked. I think it's there for everybody to see. We kept a team in the championship that were 10 or 12 points behind. But would I have changed my approach to it now? Yeah, probably. As I say, you've got to try and understand the players' feelings, understand what they're going through, understand they've got work. They've got work outside. Don't get me wrong. Subconsciously, I had little things in the back of my head to give us advantages. For example, and it sounds really silly, but I'd moved the 7:45 kickoffs to 8 o'clock. It doesn't sound a lot, but gave our guys 15 minutes extra who were coming off their jobs to get to the stadium without stressing. We made the pitch a bit smaller because I felt the pitch was too big down at Dumbarton. But I loved every minute of it down Dumbarton. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. An unfashionable side in the first division. A wee bit direct, to be honest. Back to front. But I don't think teams fancy coming down to players.
As you say, you're a young guy, but obviously you were doing the business because St Mirren came in for you. Again, just like your playing career, you were doing a good job. You go to St Mirren. How did that move come about? And was it just right? It's a level up.
Yeah, well, St Mirren being relegated. It's a tough time for St Mirren. Danny Lennon had left the summer before. Tommy Craig had been the manager. Gary Teal and Jim Goodwin were the joint assistants. Tommy had lost his job. Gary had become the manager. Jim was back in the changing room. There was a lot going on. John McGinn had the spike in his leg, all this sort of stuff. It was just a really, really tough time. But so when it came calling, I went for the interview, interviewed pretty well, and that was it. They offered me the job. Again, a learning experience. I went to a fantastic football club with decent people at the wrong time. But you learn from it. You learn harsh lessons. You lose your job. That's the biggest one. And it's hard to get back into football. But I still feel it was the right time. I felt I'd taken Dumbarton as far as I could. I felt Dumbarton needed freshened up. I felt I needed a fresh challenge. But there was definitely aspects of the job at my age and with my experience I wasn't ready for. I just wasn't. I wasn't ready to handle them. Didn't know how to deal with them. So it was tough.
So after you left there, you went to Norway. Is that the reason you went over there to be an assistant? Was just to learn again?
Yeah, well, I got offered the opportunity in Ascar by my friend Kevin Nichol. He'd been there for a number of years. We'd been on the pro license together, which is where you meet a lot of your connections. I'd known Kevin for a long time, but we hadn't crossed paths for a long time as well. And then he kind of asked me out of the blue, do you want to come over in November, have a wee look around? I would like you to be my assistant. So I went over for a couple of nights. It was all a bit hazy because winter in Norway compared to summer are completely different, but I just thought it was a good opportunity, a little bit different for me as well. Somewhere I never thought I'd be going. So I went over there in the November, and then we started in January for pre-season. But yeah, look, Norway was a wonderful time for me. It was a tough challenge away from family. My father passed away when I was in Norway, totally unexpectedly. So it changes your perspective on things. But as a place and people and workplace, fantastic.
Definitely. I mean, it's funny because you go down to Norwich and you're struggling there, kind of way in that, and then you decide to move to Norway for a couple of years, which is just. But as you say, you've got to do these things for your career and that, and you. But did you find when you came back to Airdrie then? So obviously you wanted to come home, I'd imagine. Did you find that you'd learned a lot over there then, and it helped you when you went into Airdrie?
Yeah, 100%. Again, it was Norway was fantastic. I was only going to go for 1 year, and I'd done a second year, and then I verbally just a week before I agreed to do a third year. And as I say, my dad had passed away about a year before, and at that point, I had to kind of just hold a little bit because my first initial thought was get back home. Probably everybody's thought. Get back home. What you do in Norway, you must get back. You've got to, life's too short. Kids are, growing up. Your family's getting older. And I was offered the chance to go back to Scotland, but the job didn't do it for me. And so I had to, just take stock a little bit. And as time goes by, like everybody knows, when you're in that grieving process, things will sort themselves out. And I was, I remember very clearly walking down the street because where I lived was close to the stadium, so I used to go down. I just walked down, and I remember thinking that day, I says, like, God, this is going to be my third year in Norway here. This is, that's quite a long time. I mean, it's flown by, and I've loved it, but the reality is 3 years. What are you going to do? You're going to build a life here. Are you going to set up here? Are you going to? Is this your career? And then I got a call very strangely out of the blue from a UK number, which I didn't know, and I answered it, and it was a reporter somewhere in the West saying, "Oh, I believe you're in for you're a contender for the Airdrie job." And I was honest. I said, "Look, sorry, no, I mean, I don't even know. I'll be honest, I didn't even know the Airdrie job was up." And it must have been a couple of days. So I thought, only looking back again, I think maybe they knew something I didn't. So a couple of days later, I did apply for the job. I was sitting in the apartment one night. My mum was visiting, and I applied for it. And it was like an email address of Airdrie at reception.com or something like that. So I applied, I got an email the next morning, and it wasn't. It was from a personal email address, so which I thought was really strange. And it was, I'd like to speak to you this afternoon, type thing. And so I said, yeah, no problem. So I spoke to him, spoke to the guy at Airdrie. We set up a quick Zoom call, and it was done within, probably 24 hours. And I have to say, Airdrie were fantastic at that time, because we had 2 weeks to go this season, and the owner at Airdrie said to me, Ian, you can stay for 2 weeks in Norway and come back after that. And I said, no, I know how football works. Things come and go very quickly. So I said, no, Paul, I'm coming back. I'm coming back on the weekend, and we'll get going.
How did you find your time in Airdrie then? Did it make you shape you as a manager then? Because obviously you're still a young guy at that point. Still a young guy now, but do you think that shaped you as a manager at that point as well?
Yeah, it changed me a little bit. I took all the stuff I learned from Norway, or tried to take as much as I can, into Airdrie. Airdrie was going through a really difficult time. There was a changeover in ownership, perspective of Airdrie as well. So I went in there, and Airdrie were part-time. And then the owner we'd always had the plan to go hybrid and then full-time eventually. And our goal was always to get promoted. Not instantly. We didn't actually want promoted instantly. It was a slow burner for us, and that was the way I liked it, because it gave us time, gave us a chance to breathe. The guys at Airdrie were fantastic to work for. They were. I knew that at the time. I know it now. I'm not saying they were soft on you, because they would let you know when things weren't right. Of course they would. As you know, it's their money. It's their legacy as well. You have to appreciate that and try and protect that as much as you can. But we had a fantastic working relationship. We understood the course we were on. We knew Airdrie had the potential to get back into the Championship, possibly higher eventually, which will take time, and they still have. But I went into Airdrie, and I was really disappointed in my first couple of weeks with the standard of the level, I have to say. I thought it'd be better than that. I also knew when I went in, and I said to the owner, quite honestly, I said, Paul, we can't get in the playoffs. I mean, we can, but we don't want to get in the playoffs, because we're not ready. We're just not there. Because in the playoffs, anything can happen. You could win the playoffs. And if Airdrie had won the playoffs that season, it would probably have decimated the club, because it cost us a lot of money. Yeah, we've got bigger crowds, but we'd have to replace a whole squad, probably on 2-year contracts as well, to get the guys in we wanted. It would have killed the club financially. So we finished 5th that year, which is probably where we deserved. The next season, we were okay at best. And then obviously COVID comes along and changes everything for everyone. And we went on a mad run and got to the final, which we were well beaten. But we ran out of legs. People always go on about those 2-legged finals. We were playing 3 games a week for 5 weeks before it. We'd done. Our gas had ran out. Or the tank was empty, because not just physically but emotionally, guys were done. We had like 13 fit players for the final, and we were well beaten, and deservedly beaten as well. But the next again season was tough. We went on a head-to-head with Cove Rangers, who again made this football. We go on a 25-game undefeated run. They go on a 28-game undefeated run. I mean, have you ever heard of anything in any league ever of that happening? It just doesn't happen. Even when we played each other, we drew. It was crazy. So really, really proud of my time at Airdrie. I think I built something there. I think I helped, the current situation that they're in. It didn't happen overnight, and there was tough times, troubled times. But we knew what we were doing, and I was given backing. See, the backing I was given, oh God, it was forever grateful. And I knew this season, obviously, Airdrie went through a really, really difficult period in the Championship, and everybody was calling for the manager's head, and people were saying, surely 20 games without a win, that's a long time. I said to people, I'll tell you right now, he ain't going anywhere. I know that unless it's changed, I know the guy who's running them, he's going to back his manager until he literally cannot do any more, because he's not that type of guy. He will give you every inch of backing.
Oh, brilliant. So obviously you're very happy with your time there, but you did move on to Raith Rovers. What sparked that move, mate, and how do you look back in your time at Raith Rovers?
Yeah, it was obviously the season that we came second to Cove, went into the playoffs. We played Montrose over two-legged, a crazy couple of games. Well, second game in particular. We lose up at Montrose 1-0. And then we were 2-0 down at home after 20 minutes. And then we're 3-1 down at home after 55. And somehow we win the game 7-6. I don't know how we done that, but we did. Which was an amazing feeling. And we went to that final. I was a wee bit paranoid about the final. I could just see our levels dropping a little bit, but we'd been on that such great run that I knew the guys were tired. We played Queen's Park that season 8 times in cup and leagues, and we hadn't lost a game. And I know football's cruel, really cruel. And they beat us with a penalty with 3 minutes to go in extra time, and suddenly your whole season's done. Collapse. Boys are on the floor, on deck. I'm on the floor. Mentally, physically, I'm okay, but some of the boys are bawling their eyes out. So, I couldn't have asked any more from the players or the club. And then I was going down to Newcastle the next day with my eldest son for the football, and I got a call I think it was that morning, saying Raith Rovers have called. Want to speak to you. And I said to Airdrie, I said, look, I'm going away for the night. Can I have a wee think about it and I'll call you back? So all those emotions, you've lost the playoff final again, 2 in a row. You think you've done a fairly successful job. Raith Rovers have come calling, they're in the championship, higher level. So I phoned Paul, I said, look, Paul, I want to speak to him. If that's okay, he said, yeah, okay, no problem. And then I got a job. Again, for me, it was a step up in terms of the football level. I wasn't sure on the club level because I'd been working at a fantastic football club with people that had ran it regimentally. So, yeah, I went to Raith, and there it began.
And obviously, your time at Raith, a couple of years there, again, you got into the playoffs, finished second. How was that season for you? Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, the first season was hard. We had a lot to do. We had a lot to deal with. We had a lot to sort of fix. And then kind of new ownerish. It wasn't a new ownership. It was a mixture of the current board and new board came together. And we had a great time. We went, when I look back on my 2 years at Raith, I look back at, it was disappointments, of course it was. It was highs and lows like everywhere else. But I look back and I think to myself, God, in 2 years we actually done quite a lot because we got to the quarter-final of the Scottish Cup at Ibrox. We got to the final of the Challenge Cup. We got to a semi-final the next season of the Challenge Cup. We got out the group stages of the League Cup and we got to the final of the Premier League playoff. So we actually achieved a lot in 2 years. But it took time again. Raith Rovers needed a lot of TLC. I didn't realise the impact when I went in of the January previously. Everybody knows about what happened at Raith Rovers. I'm an outsider, so I didn't really know. But when I got into it, I didn't realise what I'd done to the club and what I'd done to the community, what I'd done to the town of Kirkcaldy. So we had to build that, and we had to build it quickly because at that point, Raith Rovers was on its knees a little bit.
And obviously, like I say, you did end up getting in the playoffs and that. So, but were you happy with the team you built at that point then?
Yeah, really happy. We knew the playoffs were going to be hard. I knew whoever we played in the first game, Partick Thistle and Airdrie, was going to be hard. And then we get through, and probably the team that we didn't want was Ross County. I'm not saying we would have beat the other teams, but Ross County was a tough one for us. And they were better than us. They were physically stronger than us. They were higher level than us. Again, it goes back to energy, mentally and physically for the boys. We'd use so much energy up. People forget we were chasing a league title. We were trying to, chase Dundee United, who had probably 4 times the budget than us. We then had to overcome Partick Thistle over 2 games, went to extra time and penalties. We had about 3 days to prepare for the first leg, against Ross County, again, a team from the league above you. Hard for the players, hard for the staff. So it's not just easy. People think, oh, well, it's only 2 games. It's a whole season. So I think we played something like 52, 53 games that season. So for us to go that long and that deep into the playoffs and then face a team from a league above you, not just over 1 game, which is hard enough, but 2 games, it's hard. I mean, Livingston done it this season, and people will always compare that, but it's uncomparable.
So you did that fantastic achievement, and then we all know what happened the next season, mate. I really can't actually believe it, but to be honest, obviously nothing compared to how you must have felt. But describe that moment that you get told, mate, that you were sacked.
Yeah, we'd done pre-season, everything was fine. We went through the League Cup campaign. We had some good games, most good games, a couple of average performances against Stranraer and against Hamilton, but we hadn't lost. I think that's important as well. When you're not playing well, you're not losing games, because you see a lot of funny results in that League Cup. And we lost up at Ross County, which we'd been there just 6 weeks, 7 weeks prior, and we're well beaten. This time we weren't well beaten. We were actually the better team, deserved to win the game, lost in the last minute. And to be fair to Don acknowledged that after the game. So progress, in my opinion, was being made. We'd signed some good players. We'd retained Sean Byrne. We'd obviously Paul Hanlon, Lewis Stevenson. We'd brought in a couple of young boys as well, Lewis Gibson, Kai Montague, all these sort of lads. And the place was happy. That's probably the thing I don't understand more than anything. The place was bouncing, even if we lost the game, which we did on the opening day of the season against Airdrie. Okay, we didn't play very well, and we weren't in great form in terms of our performances, but we'd lost 2 games. People forget we'd lost 2 games. Ross County away, Airdrie away by 1 goal, both times. We weren't getting beat 3 or 4. Players weren't down in tools. Players weren't trying. We had so many injuries going into that Airdrie game. It was incredible. We had like 5 or 6 first-team guys who would have played the game out. So I get the call on the Sunday morning. I spent most of the Saturday night, to be honest, and Sunday morning thinking, like, what do I do? How do I get the boys going again? Because I cared for the guys. I really did. And I just wanted to get them back to where they could go. And I firmly believed, I still believed in them, 100%. There was no. I told them that after the game against Airdrie. I said, look, guys, we're feeling crap today, first day of the season, but I believe in you, 100%. This is football. It's tough. Okay, so let's go away. We'll get back to work and we'll rectify this. But anyway, I get the call on Sunday morning. Just honestly, a 2-minute phone call. Just you talk. As I say, you pace around the handbags for 30 seconds, and they tell you, and that was it really. There's nothing I can do at that point. The decision's made. The decision's made before. Even if I'd beat Airdrie, I was a dead man walking. It was the first moment I went on a bad run, which was going to happen. I was out.
I remember I was out walking, my mate texted me, he's like, Ian Murray's just been sacked. I genuinely thought he was joking, right? I was neighbour or whatever. Checked it, true, couldn't actually believe it. And, it made me think when you were talking earlier about like, being a player and you move on and that, and it just shows you, though, that clubs will quite happily get rid of you if they don't feel that you're, at the level, or they want to continue the relationship with you. So that's why, another reason why players should be moving on. But so obviously that's done now, mate. So what's your plans for the future? And I remember seeing you a couple of months ago talking about how you were going to maybe wait to the end of the season and then see what's out there. So is that your plan, mate? Is that what you're going to do?
Yeah, look, I want to get back in to football. It's difficult at this moment. It's a time of year where there's not a lot of movement. Open to anything. The Raith Rovers thing certainly hasn't taken away my passion for what I want to do, and it's not my confidence at all. It's probably taught me a lot more than I realised. Tough tough times bring out the sort of fighter in you. They make you reflect a little bit. I have no grievances against Raith Rovers. It was their decision. Could they have done it? Could they have done it better? 100%. Is there some people who are probably there embarrassed, not wishing to see me? Probably. But I don't wish them any harm. Raith Rovers is a fantastic football club. Had a fantastic time there. We were building something that was taken away, but that's life. You move on. So I'm ready for my next challenge. Simple as that. And my next challenge, I'll try and do exactly the same. Regalvanise a team or push a team to their limits, try and improve them, make the fan base proud of what they're watching, proud to come along and see their team. And that's what it is for me.
Unfortunately, it is just cutthroat. I don't actually want name dropping or anything here. This is just the people I've been talking to. But we spoke to Mark Warburton last week, and he was saying that when he was at Brentford in the January, they said to him, there was rumours that like the Real Vallecano manager coming in, and he said, what is this? And they spoke to him, and they said, aye, it's true, but do you want to continue the rest of the season? And he's like, well, what if we get promoted? And like, that doesn't matter. We're still not going to go with it. It's incredible. It's the same thing happened with him with Nottingham Forest. He hit every expectation before the league and before the season started, and they still parted ways with him, mate. So it's just, unfortunately, that's football, isn't it?
It happens at every level. It happens to better managers than me, and it'll happen again. It was the first time I've been on the end of it, so it was new to me, and it was hurtful. Like I say, you learn from it. You learn a lot of lessons from it, and yeah, look, I'm not. It would be easy for me to come on any podcast or anywhere and slaughter the guys at Raith Rovers. I'm not going to do that. I never will. But I know we'll see them at some point, and it'll be more comfortable for me than it will be for them.
Right, mate. Just a couple of wee things before we end. I've told this off another podcast, a very well-known podcast, and I'm probably assuming you know the answer to this, right? But I'm going to do it anyway, because if I was in your position, I'd be on transfer market and I'd be finding out all my stats. So I'm just wondering, do you know who the top 3 players are that you played alongside?
Oh, I think Lewis Stevenson will be one of them.
No.
I don't know. Derek Radden?
Yep, he's number 150 matches.
Is he number 1? It must be that era then. So Derek, Gary O'Connor?
Yep, he's third.
Third, 2.
Number 2. He's a centre back.
Centre back. Gary Caldwell?
Nah.
God, centre back at that age. Rob Jones?
Nah.
I won't get it then.
Gary Smith.
Gary Smith. He came from, I think he came from Rennes in France at the time, actually.
Mm-hmm. And then the last one, mate, is
really good player.
The top 3 players that you've picked as a manager.
Oh. Got to think who I've signed a couple of times. Dylan Easton must be in there.
He's second, yeah.
Second. Scott Agnew?
He's number 1.
Yeah. Third one.
Striker.
Bloody hell. Trying to think.
2 clubs you've had him with.
So that's Dumbarton and God, I'm going to Prunty.
Nah.
I don't know. That's a tough one, actually.
Can I tell you?
Aye, please.
Callum Smith.
Oh, Smithy. Of course I should have got Smithy. Damn.
Well, mate, Ian, it's been a total pleasure, mate. Thanks very much for your time. You are a football legend, mate. It's another one we've had on the podcast. It's been a very, very quick 1 hour, 20 minutes, mate, and I wish you all the best for the future. I hope to see you in management soon, pal.
No, thanks for having me. Thank you.
No, it's a pleasure, mate. Thanks very much, Ian. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Bye-bye.